It was late on a Monday, and there I was, sitting in the bathroom, pants around my ankles, listening to laughter echo from the hallway. They were cracking up at my expense, and I could tell they thought it was hilarious, especially the fact that I hadn't picked up on what was going on with my wife. I guess to them, it was unbelievable that a husband could be so clueless while his wife was messing around right under his nose. Colin Wilson, the guy who claimed he'd hooked up with my wife, was bragging to his buddy Ben Kramer about how he managed to charm her at last week's party. That was the same night I had to leave early for a break-in down at the art gallery. I wasn't gone long, maybe 2 hours, but I made it back before the party wrapped up. When I got there, Allison was sitting at a table with 3 others, including Colin. The rest were Colin's boss and his wife. My name's Brian Sexton, and I work as an insurance investigator for a pretty big company that deals almost exclusively with high-end clients. You probably haven't heard of us. Our business is discreet, and we serve a tight circle of folks with a lot of money and assets. I've been with the company since college, 15 years now. I'm 37, right in my prime, and my main job is to check out accident scenes where the claims get into the serious money. Most of the work is pretty routine, but every now and then, things get exciting, especially when it comes to thefts or major robberies. Sometimes, I even look into car accidents if it's one of our clients. I've built up a solid rep in the business, and sometimes other firms will borrow me for tough jobs, but only if they pay a premium. I travel a fair bit, though never for long stretches, and if a case is going to take a while, I've got a crew to handle the grunt work. I've been married to Allison for 14 years, and we have 2 great kids, Regina, who's 10, and Christine, who's 8. Allison is a year older than me and works at the same company, handling the front desk for Bill Quinn, the company president. We got together before she joined the firm, but when she got laid off from her old job, I nudged her to apply for a spot where I work. It took some wrangling with HR since they frown on employees dating or being married, but I'd proven my worth, so they let her come on board. Bill Quinn needed a new secretary, and since Allison had more than 5 years' experience as an executive assistant, she was a perfect fit. Bill took to her right away, and she started as his right hand in the office. Now, about Colin Wilson and Ben Kramer, they're not really friends, more like colleagues I know from around the office. They're both specialist underwriters who write big policies for people with major assets or corporations. Both of them report to Jerry Skogins, who happens to be a good friend of mine. My boss is Bill Quinn, and I mostly work solo, though every once in a while, Jerry will loop me into an interesting case. The conversation I overheard in the bathroom happened about a week after that infamous party. I ducked in there because my stomach was giving me trouble. Those scallops I had the day before must have been a bit off. While I was sitting there, feeling miserable, Colin and Ben strolled in, chatting like nobody else was around. They started talking about the party, and Colin just launched into a story about what happened with Allison. The more I listened, the sicker I felt, though this time, it wasn't just the bad seafood. So, how'd you manage to get with her? I never figured she was that kind of woman. Come on, spill it, since I missed the party myself. We danced a few times, and she seemed pretty friendly, but Brian was around, and she just laughed when I suggested we slip away to my office. She said Brian wouldn't be too happy if she took off with me. So then what? What did you do next? Well, I talked her into having a drink with me while Brian was busy dancing with his secretary, Judy. I got the bartender to pour a double for her, and while she was chatting with someone else, I switched her glass. I just wanted her to loosen up a bit, maybe get a little braver on the dance floor. Yeah, but Brian was still there. How far could you really go? Wait, did you somehow arrange for him to leave? Nah, that was just luck. We were dancing when Brian came over to say he had to step out for a while. She wanted to go home, but he told her to stay and enjoy herself since he'd be back soon. She didn't seem thrilled, but she stayed and sat with me and Jerry and his wife. So what happened after that? Get to the interesting part. Brian left, and I got her another drink, again, a double, thanks to Joe behind the bar. She didn't notice. We did a couple slow dances, and she started getting pretty tipsy, leaning on me and giggling. A couple more drinks, and she was relaxed, almost out of it. I suggested we get some fresh air, and she agreed. We ended up outside, sitting in my car, and one thing led to another. She was clearly under the influence, so I kept things light. We kissed, and she let me hold her, nothing more than that. She just seemed to want comfort. We talked for a bit before I made sure she was okay to go back inside. That was it. I thought you said more happened, man. Not really. She seemed to regret staying out so late when Brian got back. I think she just needed a break, honestly. I didn't push it. Can't believe Allison would even let you get that far. She's always seemed pretty loyal to Brian. I'm telling you, I didn't make any of it up. I think she was just lonely with Brian gone for work all the time. She did mention getting her hair done next Saturday and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I might take her up on it, but I'll keep it friendly. Man, Brian's a lucky guy. Allison's a catch. If things don't work out, maybe you'll put in a good word for me? We'll see, but let's not talk about this again. I don't want any drama. Fair enough. They both left, and I was still sitting there, trying to process everything I'd heard. Could this really be happening? My stomach felt like it was tied in knots, and this time, it had nothing to do with the scallops. When I thought back to that night at the party, it was almost 11 by the time I got back. Allison was at a table with Colin, Jerry, and Jerry's wife, Julie. She didn't seem drunk when I joined them, and she was deep in conversation with Julie about the kids. Colin didn't stick around long after I sat down. I didn't notice anything strange between them at the time. The only odd thing was that, when we got home, Allison was especially affectionate, which was a little unusual that late at night. Was it guilt? Remorse? Maybe. I couldn't tell for sure. A week had passed since the party, and nothing seemed different with Allison. She didn't act any differently or bring up anything about me leaving early, nor did she mention anything special about her evening. When I asked her, she said she'd danced with Colin and Jerry a bit but mostly talked with Julie about school and the kids' upcoming play. She also said she would have preferred to come home when I left. I decided not to push it and just kept a closer eye on things. One day, I tried to feel things out. Hey, babe. Got any plans for Saturday? I was thinking about playing a round of golf if you don't need the car. She looked at me and said, I'm getting my hair done this Saturday after lunch. It'll probably take an hour or so. Where are you playing golf? So, she really did have a hair appointment. I never even knew that. How would Colin know, unless she'd told him? It was all starting to feel a little too real. I'll probably just hit the country club. Maybe see if Ben Kramer wants to join. Jerry's a member there, isn't he? I know Jerry is, but I don't really know Ben or his wife, she said. So I'm not sure. Me neither. What about Colin Wilson? You talked to him at the party, right? Maybe he's up for a game. Allison turned and looked at me, her face unreadable. She hesitated before she spoke. Why would you want to hang out with him? Allison shot back, her tone sharper than I expected. I mean, seriously, pardon my language, but that guy is a real jerk. I only danced with him a couple of times at the party, and even that was too much. He's just something else, you know? That caught my attention. Was she trying to steer me away from Colin so they could keep their secret meeting, or was she really just disgusted by the guy? Either way, it wasn't like Allison to badmouth someone so openly. It was unusual, and it stuck with me. Oh, I don't know him all that well, I replied, keeping things casual. He's friends with Ben, and the two of them seem pretty tight. Maybe it's not such a good idea. I'll just give Phil and Charlie a call instead, they're always up for a round. She seemed relieved. Yeah, that sounds like a better plan. Honestly, stay away from Colin. He's nothing but trouble. All right, I'll cross him off the list. So you're good with me golfing this Saturday? Sure, I'll be out anyway getting my hair done. How about we make dinner plans for later? We could go to the Cypress Inn. I'll have fresh hair, you'll be relaxed from your game, and we can enjoy a nice night out. I'll drop Chrissy and Gina at my parents' place. Sounded good to me, so we made a plan to meet back at the house by 5:30 and get ready for the evening. If I played this right, I'd have everything I needed to finally confront her, maybe even serve her divorce papers over dinner at one of the best restaurants in town. The next day at work, I made my way down to the equipment room, grabbing what I needed for a little field work of my own. I decided I'd take one of the company vans with the surveillance gear, parking it in the lot until Saturday morning when I'd head out for golf. I grabbed 2 small audio transmitters, one to slip in her purse and another for her car, and a GPS tracker for her vehicle. That way, I'd know exactly where she was at any given moment. The van had video capability too, but honestly, with Colin talking about a motel, I wasn't sure how I'd get any useful footage. Maybe, if I got lucky, I could hide a camera in her jacket, but I'd have to play that by ear. The GPS would let me follow her movements down to the address, as long as I parked the van somewhere nearby. The audio mics would pick up conversations, and I could record everything right from the van. Best part was, all the equipment worked remotely, I didn't even have to sit in the van to get the intel. Just park it within a mile, and I was all set. For the rest of the week, I did what I do best, observe. Keeping an eye on Allison, Ben, and Colin became my top priority. I didn't notice anything unusual, nothing that really set off my radar, but I decided to try to squeeze some info out of Ben anyway. He was working on a policy for a big factory complex, and it wasn't out of the ordinary for me to drop by and check on things under the guise of risk analysis. So, that Tuesday, I stopped by his desk, which happened to be right across from Colin's. He was deep into paperwork. "Hey, Ben, you got a minute to walk me through Baxter's plant layout today? I need to get familiar with the site." He looked up, a little caught off guard, but nodded. "Sure, I need to get some new photos anyway. When were you thinking?" "How about in an hour?" "Works for me. I'll swing by and grab you on the way." After a few more words, I walked away and, just before rounding the corner, caught a little exchange between Ben and Colin. They both gave me this smirk, like they were in on some joke I wasn't privy to. I couldn't help but think, figures. Bunch of jerks. At that moment, I decided Ben wasn't getting a free pass either. Maybe he hadn't done anything outright, but he'd sure as hell been in on the talk, egging Colin on about my wife. That made him just as guilty in my eyes. An hour later, Ben met me in the parking lot, and we took my truck. I'd slipped one of those transmitters in the console, just in case. I wanted a record of what got said, especially if he admitted anything. Once we were on the road for the 25-minute drive to Baxter's, I turned to Ben and got the conversation rolling. "So, Ben, did you have a good time at the party last week?" He shook his head. "I wasn't there, Brian. I was traveling for work. Missed all the fun, I guess." "What fun would that be, Ben? You talking about Colin hooking up with my wife? Is that the part you missed?" That stopped him cold. He got pale, fidgeted in his seat, even reached for the door handle like he wanted to bail. Eventually, he just slumped, looking defeated. "How did you find out?" he said finally. "All I know is what Colin told me. I don't even know if it's true." "Do you really think he'd make something like that up?" I asked, not hiding my skepticism. Ben hesitated. "I don't think so, no. But how did you hear about it? Weren't you gone for a couple of hours that night? Colin told me he got her tipsy and then took her out to his car. How I found out doesn't matter. What I want to know is what else Colin said. Are they planning to meet again?" I was testing him, seeing if I could believe a word he said. "He said they were planning something this Saturday, while she was supposed to be getting her hair done. He's getting a motel room this time. That's it, Brian, that's all I know. Honest." "Well, thanks for being such a stand-up friend and telling me," I said, laying the sarcasm on thick. "You were going to come clean and tell me, right?" He nodded, trying to save face. "Yeah, of course. I like you, and Allison too. I never wanted anything like this to happen. Colin's a jerk, and I'm sorry you had to drag it out of me. I feel terrible." I remembered his words from before, something about maybe taking his turn after Colin was done. Hypocrite. I reached into the console and clicked off the recorder, satisfied I'd gotten what I needed. "It's no problem, Ben," I said, dropping my voice so he knew I was serious. "Just do what I say from here on out, and you'll be fine. Cross me, and you'll regret it. Got it?" Ben just nodded, understanding loud and clear. He knew exactly where he stood. "Just one more thing, Ben," I said, giving him a hard look. "Everything we've talked about stays between us. Not a word gets back to Colin. If I find out you told him anything, you'll regret it, I promise you that. I'll make sure you're looking for a new job, and everyone in the business will know you can't be trusted. You understand? And don't forget, I've got my ways of knowing if you talk. I'll be listening." Ben's face was pale as he nodded. "I won't say anything to Colin. If you want, I won't even talk to him at all." I waved him off. "No, just keep doing what you always do. Let him ramble. No problem if you play along. I know what's really going on now. Remember what I said and you'll be fine." After that, we barely said a word for the rest of our 2 hours at the plant. He did his walkthrough, I did mine. I'd gotten what I needed. As far as I was concerned, Ben was going down too, whether he realized it yet or not. That week dragged on, feeling like the longest of my life. I kept a close eye on Allison, but she acted completely normal. Nothing suspicious, nothing out of place. Wednesday night rolled around, and the kids had a school dance, supposed to be over around 9:30. I was sitting in the family room, half watching TV, half lost in thought, when Allison walked in, settled on my lap, and slipped her arms around my neck. "We've got a couple hours before I need to pick up the girls," she whispered, nuzzling my ear. "How about we spend a little time together?" Despite everything swirling in my head, anger, confusion, heartbreak. I was still a man, and my body reacted before my mind could catch up. Her body pressed against me, and just like that, any thoughts of restraint went right out the window. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, kissing her deeply. She opened up to me, and I could feel her breath quicken. My hands moved instinctively, finding her curves, and she moaned softly into my mouth. Then, suddenly, she stood and took my hand. "Let's go upstairs," she said, her voice low. "Now." I followed her, watching her every step as she headed to our bedroom. Clothes started flying, her blouse and bra in one direction, my shirt and shoes in another. By the time we hit the bed, we were both undressing each other, losing ourselves in the moment. She slipped off her skirt, I got out of my pants and boxers, and before I knew it, we were both naked, caught up in each other. She was beautiful, absolutely stunning. She looked at me and grinned. "Come on, big guy, let's see what you've got." She leaned over, her hands exploring me, teasing and caressing. I couldn't help but smile back, feeling a wave of love and pain all mixed up. For a while, everything else faded away, no doubts, no hurt, just us. Once she was satisfied, she moved over me, straddling my hips. She guided me to her, and I could tell she was ready. She lowered herself down, and the feeling hit me hard, pure, overwhelming pleasure. She moved slowly at first, taking her time, then pressed her body down over mine, letting me hold her close. I pulled her to me, kissing and touching, feeling like we were one. After a bit, I took her hips in my hands, helping her move, matching her rhythm, both of us caught up in the heat. I could tell she was getting close, her breath coming faster, her whole body tensing. I pulled her tight against me, and everything built to a peak. We both hit that high together, hanging on tight until the moment finally passed. Then we collapsed, wrapped up in each other, not saying a word for a long while. For a few minutes, it felt like nothing else mattered. I wanted to believe this was real, that we were just two people in love, with nothing standing between us. But deep down, I knew there were still questions I couldn't shake. She rolled over and smiled, still out of breath. "That was really nice, hon. We should do this more often. Feels like we've been missing each other lately. Let's not let that happen again, okay?" I nodded, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, definitely. What time is it? Do we have time for a quick shower?" She glanced at the clock. "It's after 9, so I better head out for the kids. Maybe later, or Saturday night after our dinner date? I can drop the girls at my folks and we'll have the place to ourselves." "Sounds perfect. We're still on for Saturday, right?" She laughed. "Of course. You've got golf, I've got my hair appointment, and then dinner. After that, I'm all yours. Unless you've had a better offer lately?" "Never," I said, trying to keep it light. "I'm all in." Allison got dressed and headed out to pick up the kids. I stayed there a while, thinking about everything. She'd acted just like her usual self, if anything, more affectionate than ever. She'd never been one to do more in bed than what we just shared. That's why I couldn't wrap my head around the idea of her and Colin. How could she be with me like this if she was cheating with that guy? Was she just a good actress, or was something else going on? I decided I'd get answers on Saturday, one way or another. While she was out, I checked the surveillance equipment. Everything was in working order. My plan was to hide the transmitters in her purse and car on Friday night. With that set, I just needed one last thing, to find out exactly where Colin planned to take her. For that, I'd need another chat with Ben. The next morning, I called Ben and asked him to meet me in the cafeteria. He showed up, looking nervous, and sat across from me. I didn't waste time. "Ben, I need you to get the name of the motel where Colin's planning to meet Allison on Saturday. Just find a private moment and ask him. Tell him you think he's bluffing, and that you'll believe him if he gives you proof, like the name of the motel or a receipt." He hesitated, clearly trying to work out how he'd pull it off, but finally nodded. "But how will you know if he tells me the truth?" he asked. "Don't worry about that," I said. "I've got it covered." Before he left, I casually reached over and put my hand on his shoulder, slipping a tiny transmitter under his collar. He was so jumpy, he never noticed. It stuck there, barely visible, and he had no clue. I headed back to my office and turned on the receiver. Sure enough, I heard Ben at his desk, talking to Colin, arranging to meet in the copier room in 10 minutes. After a short pause, the transmitter picked up their conversation. "What's up, man? Something wrong with your policy? You know I'm the best," Colin joked. Ben cut right to the chase. "Cut it out, Colin. I was with Brian yesterday, and he doesn't seem to be having any problems at home. I asked him if things were okay, and he just laughed it off. Are you making all this up about his wife? Colin sounded defensive. Hey, I'm telling you the truth. Why wouldn't you believe me? So where are you taking her Saturday, then? You mentioned a motel. Which one? If you show me proof, maybe I'll believe you. Otherwise, I'm not buying it. Colin replied, sounding cocky, no problem. I've got a reservation at the Skyview Motel on Statler Street for Saturday afternoon. I can check in at 2, and she'll be there by 2:15. You can call the place and ask for my name, there's a room in my name. That enough proof for you? Want to use my phone? All right, that'll do, Colin, Ben said, trying to keep his tone casual. I gotta admit, I envy you. Allison is really something special. But just remember, she's got a good marriage with Brian, and you're taking a big risk messing with that. Maybe think twice before you go any further. Colin just laughed it off. Not my concern, Ben. If she's willing, so am I. Besides, how great can their marriage be if she's sneaking around with me? That was all I needed to hear. I shut off the receiver, deciding the rest wasn't worth listening to, and let the tape run. At that point, I was nearly convinced. I'd hoped, deep down, that Colin would admit he was making it all up, but he doubled down instead. Now I knew for sure, he had the reservation, he was ready, and I even had the address. I could plug it into the surveillance van and let the equipment do the rest. With any luck, I wouldn't have to be there in person. Honestly, I didn't want to see or hear my wife going through with something that would tear me apart. I just wanted to get the proof I needed and figure out my next move. First thing, I called the Skyview Motel and asked if Colin Wilson had a reservation for Saturday. Sure enough, he did. That part of the story checked out. I just had to get through Friday night. Then a new idea hit me, what if I could get actual pictures of them together at the motel? I figured I'd swing by the place and see what was possible. That afternoon, I walked into the Skyview's front office. The clerk looked like he belonged in a bad detective movie, shifty, uninterested. Perfect for my purposes. Hey there, friend, I said, laying on the charm. I'm an investigator for an insurance company, need to check on a few things. Here's my ID and a warrant. I flashed my badge and handed over a very official-looking document that, frankly, was just for show. I counted on the guy not knowing the difference, and the $100 bill I slipped him helped too. He shrugged. Sure, man. What do you need to know? I asked him to confirm Colin's reservation and whether he had a room assigned yet. No room yet, he said. So I asked if he could give Colin a first-floor room facing Statler Street. At first, he hesitated, but another $50 nudged him the right direction. Soon he gave me a room number that would let me get a clear shot with my camera. I let him know I'd be parking a van in the lot, and he didn't care, just another day on the job for him. I thanked him, handed over another $50 for his silence, and left with a sly grin from the clerk in return. Driving away, I felt like everything was falling into place. I could set up the van facing their room, point the camera through the windshield, and let the tech do its thing. Now all I had to do was wait. Friday at work was tough. I couldn't focus, just thinking about what might happen the next day. I made up a reason to visit Bill Quinn's office, said I needed to talk about the art gallery break-in. Really, I just wanted to see Allison. Her face lit up as soon as she saw me, and she waved me over. I like that you've been coming up to see me more lately, she said, giving me a warm smile. Not that I'm complaining. Is something up? Should I know about anything? I shook my head. No, nothing at all. Just wanted to see you. Is Bill in? She nodded. He is. Want me to buzz him for you? Yeah, that'd be great. I need to run something by him. Bill was in a good mood and we chatted for a while. Even though he was young for a company president, he was sharp and had built a strong reputation. His wife Naomi fit the image of a trophy wife, beautiful, elegant, and not afraid to turn heads. Allison and Naomi were about the same age and seemed to get along pretty well, and Bill and I had a good working relationship. While we were talking, I asked Bill what he thought of Colin Wilson. He looked at me, a little surprised. Why do you ask? Something I should know about? If you've got a problem with an employee, you need to tell me. I told him I might have a pretty serious issue with Colin and maybe Ben, but I wanted to wait until I had more information before saying anything official. I said I might need to call him at home over the weekend if things went as I expected. He agreed easily. You know I trust you. You've always been straight with me. By the way, are you finally going to consider that VP spot I've been asking you about? I still haven't said anything to Allison, but you really should let her know soon. I said I'd been thinking about it a lot lately, and that I'd make up my mind by next week. He was happy with that, and I promised to keep him posted. Leaving Bill's office, I stopped by Allison's desk to say goodbye, then headed down to see Ben. When I reached his cubicle, I spoke up loud enough for Colin to hear, saying his risk assessment on the Baxter job was spot on. I gave Ben a thumbs up so he'd know I'd heard everything from earlier. His eyes widened, but he didn't say a word, just nodded. I patted him on the back and quietly removed the tiny transmitter from his collar. He didn't feel a thing. The rest of the workday passed without incident. When Allison was ready to leave, I told her I had to drop the company van off somewhere and would be a bit late getting home. She kissed me goodbye and left. I happened to spot Colin watching her as she walked out, shooting me a look before heading back inside. I dropped the van off at the motel, set up the camera to face the right room, and double-checked that everything was working. I let the clerk know the van would be there overnight, handed him another 20 for his trouble, and he grinned and gave me a high five. With that done, I finally headed home. Friday night brought another surprise. Allison had ordered pizza for the kids and mentioned she'd arranged for them to spend the night and most of Saturday at her mom's place. When I asked what the occasion was, she just said she liked our night together on Wednesday so much that she wanted a repeat. Was I up for it? You bet. That evening played out much like Wednesday, only this time, Allison seemed eager to try out a few new things. I couldn't help but wonder where she'd learned them, but when I finally asked, she giggled and pulled a book from her nightstand. It was an article about keeping the spark alive after 35. Turns out, most of the moves she wanted to try were right there in black and white. She pointed out a position that was easier on her knees, and mentioned she wanted to try a few other things she'd read about, including a new way to please me that she promised would be a surprise. I won't lie, it was a fantastic night, even if I had mixed feelings. For a while, I forgot all about my worries. Lying in bed afterward, I finally asked what had brought on all these changes. Allison, I love what we're doing, and I want you to be happy, but I've got to ask, what brought this on? Is there something you want to talk about? If I didn't know better, I'd think you were feeling guilty about something. She just smiled and said, it's nothing like that. Naomi said something last week that got me thinking, about us, about the girls, our whole life together. It made me realize how happy I am. I just wanted to find a way to show you how much you mean to me, that's all. Her words made me feel lighter, even though the doubts were still there. Should I press her? Or just let it go for now? I'm glad you feel that way, I said. Are you sure I'm making you happy? There's nothing you're missing, right? You'd tell me if there was. She squeezed my hand. I love our life together, and you always make me happy. I just don't want us to get into a rut or lose what makes us special. Don't you want to keep that spark? Of course I do. You never have to worry about that. I love you, Allison, and I always will. That's good to hear, because you're stuck with me now, she said, snuggling close. We spent the rest of the night wrapped up in each other. When I woke up the next morning, feeling more tired than usual, I decided to pull Allison into the shower with me. She complained about leaving her warm bed, but came anyway, laughing as I pulled her under the hot water. We shared the shower that morning, playfully soaping each other and laughing like kids. We lingered, enjoying the feel of warm water and warm skin, giving extra attention to the places we both liked best. It didn't take long before things got heated. Allison washed and rinsed me with a mischievous grin, and before I knew it, things moved in a more intimate direction. She tried out some new techniques, no doubt from her book, that left me impressed and more than a little grateful. She seemed determined to please me, and honestly, it was a morning I won't forget. After, I made sure she knew how much I appreciated it with a deep kiss, and I took a moment to return the favor, making sure she started her day with a smile. When I asked if she was happy, she just laughed and said she was ready for anything, but she'd be expecting a repeat performance that night. We finished our shower, got dressed, and went about our day. I drove down to the motel parking lot early, double-checked all the surveillance equipment, and set the timers to start recording that afternoon. I wanted to be sure I caught everything, audio, video, the works. I made sure the van was locked up tight and ready to go. By the time I left, I felt sick about the whole thing, but at least I knew I'd have the evidence, one way or another. That afternoon, golf was a wash. My mind was a million miles away, and my game showed it. I ended up losing to a couple of guys I barely knew and buying the beers afterward. By 5 o'clock, I drove back by the motel, just to check on things. Everything seemed quiet, so I called home. Allison answered, cheerful as ever. I told her I was on my way, then hung up, my heart somewhere between hope and dread. As I drove home, I kept thinking maybe I should check the tapes right away. But then I thought about our plans for the night. Did I really want to ruin our evening, no matter what I found? I decided to let it wait. For now, I'd enjoy dinner and whatever time I had left with Allison. The emotions hit me hard on the drive: heartache, anger, confusion. I still loved her more than I could express, and I couldn't see how I'd go on without her. If what I suspected was true, I knew divorce was my only option, no matter how much it hurt. She'd be a great mom, and she should have custody of the kids. I'd support them, of course. I kept telling myself that good people sometimes do bad things, and maybe there was a reason I didn't know yet. I'd find a way through, somehow. When I got home, Allison was already showered and looking beautiful as always. She said she'd finish getting ready once it was time to go. I got myself together and we headed out, right on schedule. Out in public, Allison was as radiant as ever. She turned heads everywhere we went. I'd always been proud to have her by my side, but that night, it was bittersweet, reminding me what I stood to lose. She was witty, charming, and flirted with me across the table like we were newlyweds all over again. The meal was fantastic, and as we talked and laughed over wine and dessert, I kept thinking how lucky I was, and yet how close I might be to losing it all. By the end of dinner, we both knew where the night was headed. After dessert, Allison excused herself to the powder room while I settled the bill. We left the restaurant holding hands, and as I drove us home, she slid over next to me, resting her head on my shoulder, just like we did when we were young and in love. She pulled my hand onto her lap, and I put my arm around her, feeling the old warmth between us. We drove in silence, comfortable and close. Back at the house, Allison moved around getting everything ready for the night, tidying up, making sure everything was in place. Finally, she turned to me with a mischievous look. "Should we take this upstairs and pick up where we left off this morning? I think you owe me," she teased. I grinned. "Lead the way." We made our way to the bedroom, and she surprised me by slipping my hand under her skirt. She wasn't wearing any underwear. She laughed at my shock. "If you'd been a little more daring, we could have had some fun in the car, but I figured we'd better save it for later. You like?" "Oh, I like," I replied, already feeling my pulse quicken. In no time, we were both undressed, her standing in nothing but a string of pearls. I stopped her when she reached to remove them, telling her she looked incredible just like that. She smiled and told me this was a side of her only I would ever see, that I had all of her, heart and soul. Right then, I believed her. I decided, for one night at least, I wouldn't think about what tomorrow might bring. I'd just love her with everything I had. That night was one for the record books. We tried things I'd only ever read about, and she laughed and quoted page numbers from her book whenever I raised an eyebrow. We both lost track of time, caught up in each other. By the end, I was amazed at how close we felt, and how much we'd both enjoyed ourselves. We finally fell asleep, tangled up together. Sunday morning, we woke up late and took our time getting out of bed. Allison was reluctant to get up, so I suggested a replay of one of our new favorites from the night before. She agreed, and we shared one more moment before starting the day. After breakfast, Allison headed out to pick up the girls. I told her I needed to check on something at work and would be back soon. She said she'd stay at her mom's for a while before coming home, which gave me time to retrieve the tapes and data from the van. My hands were shaking as I checked the GPS printout. Her car had been parked at the Skyview Motel, exactly as I feared. My heart nearly stopped. Part of me didn't want to see any more, but I had to know for sure. I took the tapes and DVDs home, turned on the TV and the player, and pressed play, bracing myself for whatever came next. The picture was crystal clear, the motel room right in the middle of the screen. I skipped through the video until a car pulled up. There was Colin, unmistakable, stepping out and heading straight into the room. I watched, heart pounding, as a second car appeared and a woman got out, walking up to the door. She paused, glanced around the lot, and I saw her face plain as day. My pulse raced. I rewound, then watched it from the top just to be sure. When I finished, I just sat back and let out a stunned breath. "Well, I'll be damned," I muttered, realization washing over me. Right then, I knew what I had to do. There was one detail I wanted to check, so I pulled Allison's address book from the desk drawer. Sure enough, the address I needed was there, just as I suspected. I grinned to myself. For the first time in a while, I felt like I had a way to set things straight. I picked up the phone and called Bill Quinn at home. I kept it brief, just told him I needed to see him right away. He offered to have me over, but I insisted we meet in private, just the two of us. After a moment's hesitation, he agreed to meet at the Friday's restaurant near the office. Allison and the girls were having lunch at her mother's, so I had time to get my thoughts in order. I packed up the portable DVD player and headphones and headed out. At Fridays, I sat down with Bill and laid out the situation before I even let him see the video. I could see his mood darken as I told the story. At first, he just kept shaking his head, saying Allison could never do something like that. I played him the audio of Ben and Colin's conversation, walked him through every step, and made it clear how both guys were tangled up in it. Ben wasn't the ringleader, but he sure hadn't helped. By the time Colin's bragging started, Bill's face was red and tight with anger. He'd always had a high opinion of Allison and hated what he was hearing. I asked him to watch the DVD before saying another word. He slipped on the headphones and watched the footage, his expression shifting from disbelief to pain. I turned away, giving him a little privacy. When he finally took off the headphones and looked up, I could see how hard he was taking it. We sat in silence for a minute, then I made my one request. I want both of them fired for breaking the company's morals clause, I said quietly. Gone by lunchtime Monday. If you agree, all this information is yours. I'll never bring it up again. Bill stared at me, then gave a small, grateful smile. You have my word. First thing Monday, they'll be gone and escorted out. They're done as far as I'm concerned. I may do more, but it's better you don't know those details. Sound fair? That's all I ask, I replied, handing him the bag with all the surveillance data, except one small tape I kept for myself. Allison was in for a surprise. We talked for a while longer, hashing out some details and making a plan for the week ahead. When we finally shook hands, Bill stopped me. You're a good man, Brian, he said quietly. You handled this better than most would have. I respect how you've dealt with this, and I'm grateful. For the first time in days, I felt lighter as I headed home to my family, unaware of just how much was about to change. That night at home, things felt normal. I was in a surprisingly good mood. Allison noticed and asked what was up, but I just smiled and told her she'd find out tomorrow at work. We were both worn out from the weekend and crashed early. She wanted me to hold her, and I was more than happy to oblige. We fell asleep wrapped up together. Monday at work was a whirlwind. At 8:30, Allison called me, sounding confused and a little worried. She said Bill had called Ben Kramer and Colin Wilson into his office first thing, and there was a lot of shouting. I played dumb, told her to keep me posted. 20 minutes later, she called again. Bill had asked her to get security and have them come to his office. She paused while she talked to someone at her desk, then came back on the line to say Ben and Colin were being escorted back to their desks by the guards. She hung up quickly, promising to call back. It was almost an hour before she called again. She sounded breathless and stunned. Both Ben and Colin had been fired. Bill wanted her to type up their disciplinary letters. The reason? Violation of the morals clause. Allison was buzzing, saying it was the wildest thing she'd ever seen at the company. She wanted to have lunch and talk it over, so I agreed. At lunch, Allison couldn't stop talking about what had happened. Both guys were escorted out, told never to return. Bill had been upset all morning. He even snapped at Allison once, though he apologized right after. Eventually, she turned to me, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. Do you know what this is all about? She asked. I shrugged. Why would I know? She shook her head, exasperated. Bill told me to ask you. He said, ask Brian. He knows all about it and he's the one who opened my eyes. So, what gives? Before I say anything, I want you to listen to this. I handed her the tape of Ben and Colin's motel conversation. She started listening, her expression changing from curiosity to shock, her mouth dropping open as she heard Colin's claims. She tore off the headphones, eyes wide. That's not true. He's lying, Brian. I never went to any motel with him. You can't honestly believe that tape. Is that what you gave Bill? Does he believe it too?
No, Bill doesn't believe Colin, and neither do I told her.
But you need to hear me out, start to finish. Will you do that? She nodded, still tense, but a little calmer. I overheard Ben and Colin talking about you at the party, I began. Colin was telling Ben he got you drunk, took you out to his car, and... well, you know the rest. He went into all kinds of graphic detail. Ben just listened and ate it up, so much so, he wanted Colin to set him up next time. I couldn't believe it, but I had to be sure. Allison tried to cut me off, but I pressed on. I had Ben talk to Colin, and that's when Colin told him he'd booked a motel room on Statler Street for Saturday, the same day you said you had your hair appointment. That's why I mentioned Saturday to you, to see what you'd say. Remember, we made plans for dinner? But he wasn't, she tried to protest. I held up my hand. Just listen, please. I had to be certain, so I set up a surveillance van at the motel, tracked your car, and made a video record of everyone who went into the room. I arranged it with the desk clerk to be sure I got the right spot. I watched the tape Sunday. After that, I called Bill and handed everything over. That's why Ben and Colin were fired." Allison listened, looking more and more bewildered. "But I wasn't there, Brian. I was getting my hair done just like I said. The salon's on Statler Street, but I never set foot in that motel. Don't you believe me? And I actually know who Colin was with, because she told me. It was." I cut Allison off before she could finish. I needed her to know that I believed in her, even if the truth was a little messier than that. Sometimes, it's not about honesty, it's about choosing the right path for your future together. "Yeah, I told you I believed you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And here's why. I did check the video from that day. Colin did have a woman visit him at the motel, just like he bragged about, but it wasn't you. The woman who showed up was Bill's wife, Naomi. I figured it out after talking with Jerry Skogins a couple of days back. You remember how Colin claimed he took you out to his car at the party? Well, I asked Jerry if you'd seemed tipsy, and he just laughed. He said you and his wife stuck together all night, sipping cokes, and you even asked her to hang close to keep Colin from asking you to dance. Jerry said it was clear you weren't interested in Colin at all. When I asked if Colin ever tried to get you outside for fresh air, Jerry just shook his head and laughed it off." Allison stared at me, a mix of relief and hurt on her face. "So you really did doubt me? You went to all that trouble just to spy on me? I'm not sure how I feel about that, Brian. You didn't trust me? Even after everything between us this week?" "Of course I trust you," I said gently, "but I couldn't just ignore Colin's story. Why would he say those things if they weren't true?" It hit me later that he was probably just trying to throw Ben off the trail, distract him from finding out who he was actually seeing. I had no clue who it really was, so I had to get the truth. I never wanted it to be Bill's wife. Honestly, finding that out crushed him. We talked things through a while longer, finally making our way back to work. Allison accepted my explanation, and though I felt ashamed for doubting her even for a second, I was grateful to have gotten to the bottom of it. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we were on solid ground. The afternoon was quiet until Allison called me again. Bill wanted to see her in his office later. I told her I didn't know what it was about. She seemed to buy it, and we left it at that. I didn't hear more until that evening at home. Dinner was ordinary, the girls bouncing around, talking on the phone and getting ready for bed. After the house was quiet, Allison sat beside me and told me about her meeting with Bill. "He said I should realize how lucky I am to have a husband like you," she said, her voice soft. "He talked a lot about trust, respect, and love, what it means, and how it feels to lose it. Eventually, he told me what Naomi had done and asked for my advice." I reached for her hand. "What did you say? Did you help him?" She nodded. "I told him I couldn't decide for him, but asked if he still loved her, and if he could forgive her. If he could, I said he should let her explain and try to move forward. But if not, if he couldn't forgive her, he needed to let her go. I told him not to let it turn bitter, no matter what. I think he listened." "I'm sure he did," I said. "Did he mention anything else, about me?" "No, nothing. Should he have?" I smiled. "Well, yeah, maybe. Bill offered me a job, corporate vice president of investigations. I'd have control of all the investigators, everywhere. We could even move to California or Florida, or anywhere there's a big enough office. More money, more perks. I'd still report only to Bill." She let out a whoop and nearly tackled me, wrapping her arms around my neck, laughing in delight. "When did this happen? Is this because of what you did today? Some kind of reward?" I grinned. "Now who's doubting whom? Bill actually offered me the position 6 months ago. I just wasn't ready to make that call until now. I guess everything that's happened made it real. Last week, I honestly thought I might lose you, and that made me realize what I really wanted." Allison got serious, looking me right in the eyes. "Brian, you're never going to lose me like that. Not to someone else. That will never happen. And you'll never think that way again. Do you hear me? Never again."